Hey everyone, thanks for joining. Uh, hey everyone, thanks for joining us. Give me a second. Something. Gautam, do you go?
Come again, Pratik.
Hey, do you hear an echo?
I don't hear an echo. Very clear for me.
Okay, just to confirm in the chat, someone can tell if they hear. Just give it 1 minute, please. Hey, very sorry. Getting a not sure the issues from our side. Uh, but I'm gonna get quickly started. So thanks everyone for joining. We have the Gautam with us. So I'll give a very quick introduction about them. Then I'm gonna give it to Gautam, who's gonna lead the conversation with Gauri and talk about role of platforms in VC mode in India. So starting with Gauri, who is the founder of Synchronized, and also Gauri was the ex-director of VC platforms in US, which is the largest community for platform groups in US. They do a lot of platform things. They host Platform Summit, which is one of the globally largest platform event across the world. And Kuri also does consulting on platform team for a lot of firms across the globe. So that's about Kuri. Moving to Gautam, part of the platform is in venture. He leads the platform function. We have nearly scaled to 10 folks in platform, and they are doing some amazing things. And every one of us been part of it. Again, some of us attended some of the platform things what has been doing recently. Right? So that's a very quick about Gautam Kori. So Kori, what is small information about yourself?
Awesome. How are you, everyone? Great to meet you. Um, and can we just add the slides to this stage? My name is Corey Belatsky. I have worked in sort of the venture world for about a decade, and I get the good fortune of working with funds really all around the world. Um, on this concept of VC platform. I think to start this conversation, what we want to acknowledge is that platform is a confusing thing. It means something different to literally every single fund. So I think the first thing I want to do is help provide a little bit of a definition and a structure to this conversation. Then we'll talk through some case studies and then hopefully open this conversation up to Q&A from all of you. Um, the first thing I show here is what I call the venture capital flowchart. You guys have been in sessions all week. You've been listening to some of the thought leaders in venture. So nothing here is going to be surprising. But generally, the way I see it is there's 5 steps in VC. And the goal here is one thing, which is we need to make money. We need to generate outsized returns. And whenever I hear that platform is an auxiliary service or a support service, I bring us back to here because I think what's important is to talk through and think through platform through the lens of how do we support these 5 unique bespoke activities and how do we use those to drive outsized returns. So I'll show you briefly what I mean by that. And I encourage you all to read on my blog post and read other thoughts about this. But generally, when I say platform, I look at different activities that are done across talent, across marketing, across product and data and operations. that support portfolio companies and support the fund in these 5 steps. So in the find step, right, when we're sourcing companies, this is generally platform activities around top of funnel. It might be marketing and branding or events, or it might be a data and product driven approach to network driven sourcing. On the decide side, right, when we're selecting companies to invest in, there's a lot of really interesting things that are happening with platform teams sort of taking the charge now around data, around tooling, and just around better processes internally and operationally to support the investment team in making better decisions. When we look at the win stage, this is really, especially in a market like India, where venture is becoming more and more competitive, looking very similar to the US. The quality of your brand, the quality of how you're going to help and support your portfolio companies is more and more important today than ever. So very often it is the platform team communicating what that sort of post-investment value add is going to look like, doing support before the term sheet's even signed, that helps a firm win deals. The helping stage is where I think most people think that platform team operates. And we'll hear from Bloom, who do a lot around that. But I highlight this, and I'll come through this in a second, in that not every firm is going to double down their platform efforts around helping their portfolio. And that's totally okay. For some, you might do one of these 4 things. For some, you might do none. Um, it may be helping through talent or elsewhere. I mean, the way that I look at it, there's 4 things that we need to do. We need to help a founder build a product. We need to help a founder sell that product. We need to help them to operationalize their company. And then ultimately, we need to help them secure additional financing to keep doing it all over again. It's the cyclical loop. And that's really where platform teams jump in and help, all in different and unique ways. And as I said, the end goal of all of this is one thing, which is to generate outsized returns. And the only way to do that is through the exit process. And um, you see this less in sort of seed funds and early stage funds, but as I work with growth funds or later stage funds, the focus on exit readiness, storytelling, building out a network of bankers and strategic acquirers is a huge part of the platform effort. It is really the, I would say, most tangible way to see platform efforts turn into and matriculate into fund returns. Now, the question is, why does all of this matter? And many of you have probably seen um, that last year, the VC platform community published a survey called The Power of Platform, which I led with my colleague Dale Chang. And we tried to sort of get some data around this question of, does platform matter? Because the truth is, it is a relatively new experiment in this industry. The very first platform teams emerged in sort of the mid aughts, but it hasn't been until the last even 7, 8 years that we've seen platform teams ballooning. So we've looked at the data, and it is pretty strong in telling us that venture funds with significant platform teams, and we define that as teams with 3 or more platform folks, generate outsized returns. And that's meaningful. And that, I think, helps us sort of figure out, okay, why should we do this? But if you go back to what I just shared, this is overwhelming. There's 5 steps in the process. There's probably 100 different things that platform teams can do. So the question that I ask, and the question that we're going to talk about in this conversation, is where to focus. Because in my opinion, focus is the key. If you try to do marketing and events and data-driven sourcing and talent and BD, you're not going to do anything well. So my purview, my perspective is that making sure that your platform team and your platform efforts align with the DNA of your firm, the heart and soul and the core of what you care about, and doing very few things very, very well is what ultimately aligns to driving outsized returns. So with that, I want to sort of make this real. And in my opinion, in the Indian market, what Bloom has been doing in terms of their platform efforts really is world class. So I'd like to invite Gautam up on the stage to introduce himself and share a little bit more of how Bloom approaches this framework and approaches platform at their fund.
Thanks a lot, Corey. Wonderful hearing from you every single time. And before I get started, I would love to acknowledge the organizers of this event, and thanks for the 3-day marathon of a lot of insights from really amazing speakers. So kudos to the organizing team. And for those who are already part of platform roles across funds or are looking to set up, Corey has been the OG in the space, and probably one of the finest platform professionals we all know. And if you've not been a part of the platform community, the VC platform community that Corey started over a decade ago, I think you should definitely be a part of it. That's where a lot of us keep exchanging our learnings and notes through the year. And of course, we all catch up once a year in person as well. So, on that note, uh, the entire concept of platform isn't new. I think all of us have been doing it in some way or the other, to some extent or the other. Like Corey said, uh, a beautiful representation of 5 different ways and stages where you can really come and add value. And there are 2 very important pieces to remember here, right? I think more than the how of it, which I will of course share, maybe in the next few minutes on how is Bloom effectively working with with our portfolio companies and various stakeholders on the platform side. I think what's more important for you is to figure out the why first, and then the what before getting into the how. And that's exactly what I think Corey ended as well. It's more important on why is this important for you, and what out of this is most important for you, and then get into the how do I engage, or how do I build this out, or how do I run, right? And a lot of times we make the mistake of directly jumping to the how and not really spending enough time on the why and what, because every fund is very different. We are in the business of relationships, and it all comes down to the DNA of the founding partners that make a huge difference. So, on that note, the why becomes very important. What is it that is missing as a part of what already exists that would really um, be needle shifting or orbit shifting, as we say, that matters to you, right? Uh, we always talk about this internally on, can we increase the odds of success, or can we reduce the odds of failure? And this becomes a very important piece in the overall picture of what is platform doing, and whether it's about increasing the odds of success in the 5-point framework that Corey is talking about, which is right from bringing the best set of founders in, which could mean network programs or so many different things that you could do. It could be on the marketing front, it could be strategic networks that you build, to multiple initiatives that you run, to identifying the right startups, to helping them or supporting them scale, to finally engineering exits, right? Across all of this, it all comes down to, there's a great amount of effort that the investment team is already putting in building out a thesis, backing the thesis with all the right data, going out there and identifying the best founders that fit the thesis that we as a firm believe in. And finally, it comes down to supporting them through the journey, right? And especially as an early stage investor, you know that you're going to sail this journey for the next 8 to 10 years, if not more, with that particular founder, seeing him from seed to probably his IPO. And in that stage, it all comes down to, can we have a platform team that increases the odds of success at every stage? So it comes down to, why is it important at every stage, and what is it that would actually matter to the success of the investment team at every stage, right? When you're coming in early, it would be about, can we accelerate the entire PMF journey so that the next stage investor comes in and the startup scales. Taking a step back, it could even be as simple as, what kind of network programs do we need to build out, where the founders that matter to me or are most relevant to me would probably come from, which fit the thesis that my investment team is building. I think all these are very important for us to join the dots. First, plot the dots that exist within your firm, and the dots may be very different for a Bloom versus for one of you. Plot that out and then look at what really matters today, right? And like all of us know, every year that you're able to move the needle, it makes a difference to the fund's performance, LPs, and the IRR. So what is it that could be needle shifting, keep bringing in value so that eventually over time you're able to increase the odds of success? So on that note, I would probably run you through what are some of the tenets of the Bloom's platform team itself. At a high level, these are some of the functions that have been pretty robust at Bloom. So today we are a 55 member team across our investment, corporate, and platform functions. Within the platform function, there are 5 teams. There are 2 more that I will touch upon. The 5 teams that have been pretty, pretty mature within the Bloom ecosystem: Capital Network, Market Network, Community, Talent, and Marketing and Content for us. So there's a very popular saying within the Bloom ecosystem. What we go ahead and say that we are big believers in serendipity, right? And a lot of times when you put in the right amount of curation and thought into building something for our portfolio companies, the magic is bound to happen. So with that said, this goes back to the 4th pillar or the 4th function within Corey's chart, which is talking about the kind of help that you would love to support your founders with. And the idea is, can you end up being, the investor on every founder's or every startup's cap table that in a way adds reasonable amount of value board meeting to board meeting, right? Never be the investor that just walks into a board meeting asking for updates. Can you be the investor that walks into a board meeting where the founder talks about the value you have added among everyone, right? It's always a great soft power to enjoy, and then the value that the founder believes you as a fund brings in is immense. And this could cut across you being able to stitch together their subsequent fundraisers through your capital network, all the way up to helping them build out the IPO readiness or potentially an exit for yourself. The market networks has always been looking at how do we accelerate their PMF, or GTM has been something that we've been looking at, because the single biggest needle mover for any company could be if you can help them accelerate on the revenue front, and that automatically takes care of so many different things. The community and the marketing and content team for us. So we believe content and community can be a big moat for many VC funds, right? And if you've got the right content and community game, that could be a strong differentiator for you and for your across so many different things. So we've got a pretty strong content and community team here. We believe in coming out with a lot of very strategic content that are valuable to our founders. Of course, you would notice that we also publish it for the benefit of the ecosystem. The community team not just focuses on building out the Bloom ecosystem, but also looks at bridging it with the larger external ecosystem as well. Right? And the focus has always been on also coming up with different kinds of formats. It could be small, medium, large format events. It could be very structured learning programs that help our founders groom. But what we believe is you should be able to create a community where you don't have to bring in all the learnings as a fund yourself. Over a period of time, the community should be able to help each other, with you just bringing the right nudges, right? And while that's the North Star for any community head, I believe we've been able to build that out really effectively. The feeling of oneness and the feeling of wanting to help every new founder that comes in to the portfolio. On the talent front, in my view, talent could be one of the single biggest areas of support that you could extend, because as a seed investor, if you can bring in, an amazing non-founder core team member, which is where most of the initial funding goes to, right? It's the team that they build out. It could be a big differentiator in shifting the orbit for the startup from C to Series A to Series B. And we've done close to about 2,000 hires for our portfolio companies to date through Metamorph, the extended the extended team that has been at Bloom. What I would want to leave all of you here with is all of this didn't happen overnight. We started off with one area that we believed was probably needle moving or orbit shifting for our portfolio companies, that probably we felt we needed a specialist to run the vertical. And that's how you need to go ahead and pick what is important for you at a given point of time. While all of these, in a way, eventually add value, you need to always look at what is it that adds most value at that given point of time. That could be building brand for the fund. It could be marketing your portfolio companies. That could be helping them successfully raise their next round of capital, helping them with business. Be very clear on what do you lack as a fund, and why is it that isn't why is that most important for you at that given point of time, and how do you build it out? Right? The how of it comes eventually. I want to leave you with a couple of very interesting success stories or case studies, right? And I'm sure all of you have come across very similar stuff as well. On the first piece, which is sourcing, Bloom's been a big believer of community. And for us, some of our best investments have come in through founder referrals from the ecosystem or our networks that we've built. And the networks could be the micro VCs that work very closely with us, who typically come in one round before us, or even the academic networks. Right, some of our amazing founders have been picked out of campus, and that can be attributed to the kind of network we've built with some of these really good academic institutions. A lot of times, founders recommending founders really work. And how do you build a flywheel there becomes your success there, or remote in terms of how do you ensure this moves very smoothly in terms of founder recommendations. A very important piece here is you need to remember that ultimately it comes down to a few different stakeholders. One is the founders or the startups that you're working with, the investment team that is respectively invested in each of these founders. At Bloom, we have 5 investment partners, each of them focusing on their core sectors. So you're servicing 5 different stakeholders or 5 customers, the investment team who are typically investing in a particular startup, and you're looking at making them win here. So you need to look at who your customer here is and what are you really doing for them there. So with the startups and the investment team there, ultimately the main stakeholder here is your LP, right, as a fund. How do you ensure that the LPs are satisfied with the kind of investment that goes into a platform team and the kind of platform resources that you invest in? Because some of these efforts take time for us to really show value, right? And how do you define some of these KRAs and KPIs become a very important piece, and how do you communicate it, right? I think I would love to have Corey also touch upon that. In fact, I remember in Miami we had a lot of discussions around this when all the platform leaders across funds caught up. How do you communicate some of the impact of the efforts of the platform team over a period of time? So on that note, it's very important for you to balance the impact across stakeholders, and how do you ensure communication keeps happening on a very smooth way for all of these stakeholders, right? It's just that for some of these stakeholders they may prefer monthly communication, some of them quarterly, some of them annual. Something as simple as we have the habit of sending out a platform dashboard at the end of the year, where every founder receives a report on all the value that Bloom's added to that particular startup or that particular founder, cutting across functions within the platform team. And that summarizes all the value that he's probably received from the fund through the year. And it's not just something that the founder sees, it is also something that the respective partner who sits on that particular company's board is able to see, articulate, and present, right? So there's a lot of things that you'll have to see in terms of not just designing on a design front in terms of when do you pick what, but it's also about how do you constantly keep the communication and how do you communicate effectively. You need to be able to measure every single effort that you put in. So which also comes down to how do you measure the input and the outcome of each of these functions within the platform team. And unless you have a view on being able to measure the input and the outcome across each of these functions, it's going to be very difficult for you to showcase the kind of impact across each of these for the different stakeholders. So uh, very similar to any role, any function, be very clear on the impact you would want to communicate, build out the measurement of each of these, and then get started with your 0 to 1 journey of each of these. Corey, I would love to bring you in at this point to quickly share some parallels that we could draw between how this is happening in India versus the rest of the world. Maybe I would probably share a quick, interesting um, success story, right? Something that all of us may know of some of these companies. So there's this company called Grey Orange that many of us would know. It was probably one of the first deep tech success stories out of India. One of the first deep tech startups to cross $500 million in valuation. Um, we ended up picking them out of campus, and that came through the network initiatives that we built. One of the very interesting things that happened here was we introduced Grey Orange to explore doing a pilot or automating their supply chain. And what eventually happened was Flipkart not just evaluated them because of the relationship we had with the founders. Uh, they had Grey Orange on board as a potential vendor and gave them business. At the end of 12 months, they saw the kind of savings as well as efficiency that Grey Orange could bring in Flipkart. The most interesting aspect here was that had a reasonable amount of impact on what Flipkart reported to its investors on the efficiency that Grey Orange could bring in. And when this happened, the Flipkart founders brought in the Flipkart investors into Grey Orange in Grey Orange's next round. And that took Grey Orange from serving just the Indian market to potentially a global market when Tiger Global came in. So a lot of very interesting success stories and case studies that emerge out of these. One thing that we believe is, not sure how many of you know, but we do something called the Blue Swan, which is a speed dating format of all our investor partners globally who come down every year to meet our startups. About 300 to 400 meetings happen back to back in one place over a 4 to 5 hour period. And every year there are about 2,500, 3,000 introductions that keep happening between our portfolio companies and the investors that work closely with us and invest with us. Startups Carbon Clean, which ended up raising $100 million round last year, met the investor at one such event and ended up raising a very large grant from from the European Commission, and which ended up leading to one of the sovereign funds coming in and also leading the next round. So a lot of times, what we kind of underrate is the power of serendipity, the power of curation, the power of identifying the right set of folks and bringing them to one place, and the magic it is most likely going to be creating. So on that note, I would love to bring in Corey again. Corey, if you want to quickly share, how do you see this in your part of the world? And very specifically, I would love to lead you on to one aspect of this conversation, which is you've been seeing platform for the last decade. Is there something that is evolving in your eyes, very very specifically in the coming decade? Uh, One thing that we are seeing for sure is the increasing use of data and tools across our functions. It could be on the sourcing front. It could be on our relationships with investors and potential LPs. It could be on the biz dev and the follow-on fundraising. So there's increasing amount of data and usage of tools to bring in efficiency as a fund. So that's one thing that we've been going very deep into. Would love to hear from you in general. What has been changing in the platform world in the US? Uh, what has been evolving? What is the next decade looking like?
Yeah. Thank you so much. And I think we've touched on so much so far in this conversation. And I think the first thing that you asked was, what are the differences that I see on a global scale between funds in India, funds that I work with in Europe and in the US? And I'll tell you this, as much as all of our funds have different DNAs and different networks and things like that, we all have the same challenges. And I think that this framework of how Bloom approaches things is exactly the framework that I see the best funds doing all around the world. And what I mean by that is it's very easy to say we want to build a community, right? Every fund says we have a community, but breaking that down and figuring out what actually is that community and how are we focusing? Are we going to focus on talent? Are we going to focus on capital networks? Are we going to focus on our go to market network? And doing that intentionally um, is, I think, the trick to that focus. I think the reason I bring that up is that when I work with funds in the Bay Area that you think, oh, they just walk down Sand Hill Road and they can organize a dinner with 10 of the top blue chip GPs. While the flight might be a little bit quicker than for you guys, it's just as challenging. And what it comes down to is relationships and building and investing on those relationships. Because I think, Gautam, the point that you made around serendipity is 100% what this business is about, right? If it wasn't, um, a lot more people would be doing it and a lot more people would make a lot more money. There is an art to venture, there is a serendipity to venture, and we're going to talk a little bit about how I see that changing, which is interesting. But I think that that will always stay true. And I think that being focused and being creative in how you build your network and how you activate your network and how you focus there is really, really powerful. So I think the case study that you use of how you guys break down your team and break down your focus, and what I actually see on that slide is the things that are not there is actually even more important than the things that are there, right? Is being focused there. So I wanted to add that. But the other question you asked is what's changing? And I think it goes without saying that the number one thing that is changing for every fund that I work with all around the world is the power of data. And I think that um, what's interesting about this industry, right, is if you rewind, let's say in the US, maybe 20 years ago, right, like people didn't manage their networks here, right? They managed their networks here. They managed it on an index card and they kept track of their most important relationships there. And the number of founders that they knew that brought companies public and built at that point $100 million companies, right, was pretty limited. And you kept that network tight. And because the industry was a lot less saturated, there were a lot less funds, it was a lot less competitive. It was much easier to tap into and access that network. What we've seen happen over even the last 5 years, but especially over the last 10 years, is that the size of the venture market, not only in terms of AUM, but in terms of number of funds and number of professionals, has really ballooned all around the world. I think in India, what we talked about is the same phenomenon we see in the US is a lot of these micro funds. Whether it's a single GP or two GPs with anywhere from 10 to 100 million in AUM. These funds have really exploded. And they are led by really scrappy, really high energy managers. Many of you, I'm sure, are on this call. Um, and they're competing over the same timeshare and the same attention of the talent, the customers, the co-investors, all of those members of the node as your blue chip funds. So the question is, how do you do that at scale? Right? When the number of funds has increased and the number of people that you want to reach, the size of your network, the number of angel investors, the number of top quality talent has increased. how do you do that? And the answer is it's no longer managing your Rolodex, like the physical Rolodex that used to be a thing that you put on your desk with names and cards, to move to something I query on my phone, to move to a tool that tells me who to reach, right? And I think in the next session, we're having a friend of mine, Evan from Getro, who's building one of those tools, talk a little bit about the role of this. But it's getting harder and harder, and I think that where I'm seeing funds move is to say, how do we invest in either off the shelf tools or building our own tools to better manage and curate our network, and every part of that node. Um, yeah, and just to everyone on the call, please add questions in the chat. We've got a few to jump off on to keep going, but jump in with any questions on your mind.
Please start sharing your questions. We would love to take them. Corey, till questions come in, I have a question for you. I know you consult with a lot of funds. You work with a lot of them on building their platform vision, 0 to 1. For the time being, let's assume I'm one of them. Uh, I'm into my second or third fund, and I'm looking at setting up a platform team. Probably till date, I've been focusing only on maybe my funds marketing and communication, and I'm looking at what do I do or how do I start. So is there a starting point? Is there a framework that you usually leave people with on
Yeah.
how do I decide if platform is relevant for me? Is that something I need to invest in? Uh, how do I approach? Where do I start? Because the next question is, I know it's going to come from the fee. Uh, how do I justify the investment of a cost center if that's how some of them see it? So, what is the starting point? How do you suggest people approach? What part of platform do I start with? How do I begin?
Yeah. So I think the reality here is that there is no one answer, right? If I stood on here and I said everyone should do marketing and events and content first, um, we'd have too many events, too much content, and too many VC marketers, which by the way we already do have. But um, like there isn't a single answer here. What I would actually advise funds to do when starting out is to first take a step back and look at those 5 steps and to really say along the 5 steps of this process, and if you're just starting out, exit may not be relevant, so maybe there's only four. um, where do you have a deficit? And the reason that's important is many times you have a solo GP starting a fund and they have a huge network and they have incredible proprietary deal flow. And actually building their brand and building their deal flow pipeline is not where they should spend time. If you have too much deal flow to be able to process and manage, that tells me let's actually not right now invest in marketing, right? Because if we're seeing the deals we want, or maybe we are accessing our deals through a different approach, right? Maybe we have some really interesting models doing algorithmic or data driven sourcing, and doing top of funnel is not that important. Um, but maybe the challenge is that we're really human strapped. We only have one associate. We can't process our deals enough. How do we do that better, right? And maybe there's an investment on the platform side to build tools or build processes to make selection and decision better. Um, Maybe what you're seeing is that you just started this fund, you have a great brand, you have great deal flow, but you're putting out 3, 4 term sheets a month, and maybe one gets signed, and founders don't want to take your cash. If that's the case, then we really need to look introspectively and say, okay, what is the challenge here? Is it a brand challenge? If so, how do we improve that brand? Content may be the answer, but there might be other things. Maybe you decide that actually we need to do something more than just provide a check. And we need to really crystallize and solidify what that post investment value add looks like. And that might bring you to say, you know what? Bloom has this incredible market network community. They do an amazing job accelerating the go to market of their companies and helping them to connect to customers. Maybe as a GP, I used to be a chief revenue officer or a Fortune 500 executive. I have a great network of these folks. Maybe that's what I want to invest in, or maybe talent. Maybe I come from a background of talent. So I say that to say it's really easy to say, you know what? Every other fund is doing events and content. I should do events and content. But that very well may not be the answer. So, step one is really to look introspectively on what challenges are you being faced with, and then figure out where to focus.
Absolutely. I think that's a gem, and it comes down to understanding your strengths and weaknesses as a firm. And like you rightly said, don't go boil the ocean with what is already working. You'd rather augment, what's working with what your weaknesses are, and pick that up first and see if you can add value there, right? And just to add to that, I think you made a beautiful point. It's not just about once you invest in the company, the team coming and helping and increasing the odds of success. It's also the ability to win the deal when you show them that it's not just capital, right? And which is where there's absolutely nothing right or wrong in the approach of what you take. Uh, Largely, Corey, I've come across two schools of thought. I'm sure many platform professionals on this call would probably face something similar. There are some funds who are big believers in the platform team, and the others are completely not, and that's totally fine. And we should do what works well for the DNA of our GPs and for the fund as a whole. There are some who believe that you need to spend all your effort and focus your strengths on the thesis, be sharp in predicting what the future is going to look like, build very strong network programs or initiatives to identify the best founder who will come and build for the thesis that you believe in, give him all the capital he needs to become successful, take a step back and watch. While the other school of thought is, while you do this, which is your core, see what you can do to increase the speed in which the same founder is going to become successful from point A to point B, uh, or if that means increasing the odds of success by increasing the probability of success or reducing the cost that it takes to hit a particular milestone from seed to series A. That is where the platform team typically comes in, and that's the two schools of thought which I'm sure most of the funds typically would fall under when they
Hmm.
meet their GPs as well.
Totally. Um, so there was a question that came in around measuring impact, and
Yeah,
Gotham,
there are a couple of questions. I'm gonna put them onto the stage.
cool.
Uh,
Let's start with the impact one, if that's okay,
yeah,
and then we'll get to Siddharth's question. Um, so I think we touched on this a little bit, and the point that you made, Gotham, that I loved was that these efforts take time to measure, and that is so true. And I think that very often I see funds especially in the US and Europe, especially when the individual leading the platform team might have come from a very data driven marketing background, for example, where the tendency is to track and capture incremental metrics. Right. You might want to track the number of intros we made, or the number of hours we spent with this company, or something very tactical, the number of reads or shares we had on this piece of content. And I think that's good to do, right? That is important to show that, like, what you're doing, it shows that you're doing something, right? And when you share it to founders the way that you guys do and tell your founders, hey, we did all this, that's actually really powerful because oftentimes you're not just working with your CEO, you're also helping their line leaders and a step down, and bringing that visibility up on an annual basis of saying this is what we've done is really powerful. But I want to bring us back to one thing in terms of how to communicate and think through impact. Making 12 intros doesn't matter. What matters is that you close a million in ARR, right? What matters is what is the efforts that we're doing and how does it impact one thing, which is generating fund returns. And I have one story that I just found so interesting in bringing this to life. So um, this year, it was the day before Leap Day, February 28th. A large company that all of you will know, Snowflake, had its earnings report. And on market close, they had a $75 billion market cap. And when the market opened the next day on February 29th, their market cap was $60 billion. So they lost $15 billion overnight. What's fascinating there is that the earnings report was actually amazing, right? Like they beat market expectations. And there was one thing that happened, which was the CEO, Frank Slootman, a very, very well known and respected CEO in the tech industry, announced he was retiring. And this made my mind go in circles because so often I work with talent folks that are trying to measure the number of interviews they have every day, the number of placements they make, the number of search firms they talk to, the number of outbounds they make. But it doesn't matter. What matters is how many francs do you place? Because not every CEO is going to move a public market $15 billion. They're not. But when you look at that as an investor, the power of one person, the power of one deal, the power of one introduction can sway a company's market cap, whether it's tens of millions or hundreds of millions or tens of billions of dollars in a meaningful way. And I think that's the really important thing is to not get too caught up in the data, not get too caught up in the minutia. Do it because it's helpful, but if you're spending all of your time trying to track one-off metrics, take a step back and look at it at the high level of what are we really doing that drives value creation. Um, I just I like to share that story because I think it's really important to bring these boxes on a screen to life, right? When we say talent, what are we trying to do and why does it
Absolutely. And Corey, just to add to that point, I think just wanted to reiterate on one piece that we discussed before. Uh, it doesn't matter what you pick and where you start with from what is important for your firm. I think what is very important is the why of it. Why are you doing? Why are the GPs excited about getting started with that particular function within platform? And if you're not able to envisage the kind of impact that this function is going to be doing to the firm's success 2 years down the line, 3 years down the line, 5 years down the line, I think you're setting up yourself for failure. You must be able to communicate the why of it and visualize that really clearly. Like you said, if it means I need to work on the firm's marketing and firm's branding because I need to source better, that is what you need to measure, right? And you need to be able to say this is where my starting point is, and this is where I would love to measure myself on certain things. Uh, on the market network side, if that means I'm looking at helping companies on the GTM, Corey, you were bang on. I am not going to be measuring myself on the inputs, which is, you know what, I made 100 introductions to 10 portfolio companies across 20 different unique enterprises. It means nothing unless you've actually seen it through and help them close a certain contract, right?
matter?
How do you go back and measure which of these enterprise contracts were actually strong enough, were relevant enough? Because what you're trying to build champions within each of these enterprises for your fund, who would be the first one to pick the call and say, I will help your portfolio founders on navigating the ocean, which is a multi-billion dollar enterprise, on where to begin, where to start. Are we ready for a startup like you and actually helping you close that deal? So it all comes down to the North Star being dollars, whether you're helping them close funding, you're helping them close business. It all comes down to uh, a tangible outcome that you would love to measure. And that could be smaller milestones that you set for yourself, which need to be hit to be able to reach the tangible outcome. Unless you have something tangible, you're setting up the function for failure because you're not going to be able to justify to whoever is the decision maker on why do we need that function. And that could be across marketing, content, community, um, and again, do not do something just because your peer funds are doing that. I think the most important
Totally.
piece is that never ever do something because your peer funds are doing it. Don't host a party because your peer funds did that. Try to do a bottoms up approach when it comes to planning. And
Yeah,
I think
I
one
would
of the most
actually say the
successful funds
opposite.
have done.
If your peer fund is doing it, don't do it because it won't stand out. Let's go back to Siddhar's question because I think it actually touches on this a bit. Um, oh, or we can go into this one. Gotham, you want to take this
That's
question?
good. Yeah.
No, I'll probably quickly touch this, right? So think of it as building out the two-sided marketplace. So you have the startups on one side who always have a need. They always want introductions to potential customers, uh, to potential investors who would lead the next round. It could or to potential great candidates who would take it higher. So there's always a demand from the startups. When if you're starting out, unless you have a great supply side, in this case, a strong network of people you can connect your startups to, there's no point going to the startups and asking, what do you need? You know what they need. Every startup wants access to all of these things. They want, like Corey said, they want you to open the Rolodex for them. A lot of times, the relationships of the fund and its leaders is your Rolodex. Today, access to the network is no longer the moat. Everyone has access. There are a lot of tools that help you with access. I'm sure the next session is going to be touching that as well. It's about how do you make sense of that network, and how quickly can you connect to the most relevant person in your network becomes your Rolodex today, right? It's not about just the access to the network anymore, and which means you have to constantly be out there building relationships. A very important point, a large mistake that a lot of us do is it's very easy to build a network of people, go out there, talk to them about what you do. A lot of times we go to them only when we have a need. We go to them and say, oh, you know what, my company wants to sell to you. Can you please meet them? Right? That is the last thing you should do. In our space where it's all about relationships, figure out 5 ways in which you can keep giving to the ecosystem and keep them warm. I'm sure at some point when you need something, when your founder needs something, they would come and help you out or support your folks, right? So figure out ways in which you can keep engaging with your ecosystem. It could be the enterprise partners, it could be peer investors, it could be growth investors, it could be your LPs. Figure out ways in which you can keep giving them value, and whenever you meet them, I'm sure they would be happiest to support. So you have to be out there, Shiva, identifying your ecosystem and how do you keep meeting them. It's an enterprise sales motion. Bottom line, you have the large universe. You need to pick and prioritize the folks you need to keep building relationships with.
Yeah, and I'll touch on the cold start problem. I'll give you two hacks here because I think it is a real problem. Is if you're a new fund, if you don't have a network, how do you get connections to CISOs at Fortune 500s? It's really hard. Um, there's two things that I've seen work. One is to send cold emails and to put in the cold email, your fellow CISOs have said you're amazing, right? I've been recommended by your peers to reach out. One of your friends told me that I need to talk to you. You can send that to 10 people. One of them might say back, which friend recommended me? And you might not have an answer, but that's okay because people do like hearing that. And that is a good way to sort of get in their inbox and start building that relationship. I know I've worked with funds where we start investing in a new industry, right? We might say tomorrow, you know what, we want to invest in flying taxis. We don't know anyone in the flying taxi market. Our founders don't know them, our LPs don't know them. How do we get there? Venture is a game of hustle. So be creative and hustle there. I think the second thing I would say is, especially when looking outside of the borders, right? When trying to access executives or corporations in the US, um, to think through affinity networks. I'll tell you, I worked with a client in Poland that did not have a very large corporate network or talent network in the US. And what we went about doing was finding Polish Americans who have a sort of relationship connection to the country and reaching out to them because they don't know much, right? If you're a Polish American, but you've lived in Poland, not in the US for 90% of your life, you may not know much about the Polish venture ecosystem, and you may actually want to, right? And in our case, there is a massive community of very high-powered, high-ranking, and well-connected Indian Americans or Indians in the UK that you can all reach out to and build those relationships. So I would say to take advantage of that when possible. I think we have time just for this last question around structuring platform teams. Um, I'll give my quick thoughts on that, Siddharth, and then Gautam, you can jump in because I've worked on both sides, right? I started my career actually as that scrappy generalist that knew nothing, and then I've sort of built out my expertise more broadly. I'll give you a very tactical answer here. I think it comes down to management fees. I think it comes down to what you can afford to hire. If you only have budget to hire, let's say, one platform person, and you can't necessarily afford to hire a very, very experienced talent partner, you're going to look for a jack of all trades generalist, and that might be perfect. Um, I think that what I find is as funds grow, as funds mature and sophisticate, you are looking for more specialized talent generally. That's the trend that I see. Um, but I've also seen funds where there's a very, very small fund in the US called Homebrew. They have two GPs and one very senior talent partner, and that's it. And they decided that that was their right approach. If you look at Founder Collective, they have one senior content person, and that's it. So there really isn't a right or a wrong answer here. I think the question is I would take a step up, again, look at those 5 steps and say, where do we want to double down? If it's talent, hire a specialist. If it's 3 different things, you may want to hire more of a generalist that can touch different pieces. Um, so, anything to add there, and then we can wrap?
Nothing beautifully put, Corey. Nothing to add to that. It all comes down to how much you can afford and what are the budgets that you can set. But our learnings as well has been that start with generalists and then expand to specialists as you scale the fund and the team. But one thing that always cuts across is pick people who are obsessed with supporting founders. I think
Yeah.
that's common across different roles.
Let me touch on that. I think there's 2 things I would look for. One is someone who is obsessed with founders. Now, to be fair, that is if you're an early stage venture fund, right? If you're doing growth equity and private equity, that's not as important. But someone obsessed with founders. And 2, and this is a really important one, and for anyone on this call who's in a platform function, I'll leave this with you, which is you also need people who know their limitations. I find very often that you might hire a generalist and a founder will jump into a call with them and ask them, how do I hire a CFO? And that generalist may never have done that before. And it's okay to say, I don't know. But when interviewing these folks, it's really important to make sure that if you hire a jack of all trades generalist, they know I'm great at this and I don't know this, and that they can communicate and be comfortable with those boundaries. Um, because what you don't want is a generalist that tries to do 12 things and actually can't do any of them well. You need a generalist that knows that they're great at these things and they don't know these things, but they're going to connect founders with someone who's an expert there. Knowing your limitations is really important as well. And it goes to our broader point on focus. With that, thank you for having us. The next session is going to be wonderful. Evan is a legend in this space, and thank you for everything you guys are doing.
Thank
Thank
you,
you so
Corey.
much, Corey, and thank you so much, Paul.
Thank you for joining us. And again, it was wonderful. I think we should do a part 2. I think there are a lot of unanswered questions and few other things in the chat. I know it's a very, very short time. Can think more of this like a intro or a teaser, which we did. Now, probably we can continue these chats more sooner with more focused discussion. And thank you everyone for joining. I think everyone can also join the next session. So it's going to be very interesting. Whatever we talk, we're going to discuss in more practice with the tool there. Get so. See you guys there. Thank you.